Hi, this is Tonya Gibbs from Psycho Mom Scrapbooks and More and from Sassy Swarm, and I'm going to show you today how to create a metal flower, three-dimensional flower, using a soda can. What you're going to do is you're going to need to gather up your supplies first, and I am wearing, if you notice, rubber gloves because I want to make sure I protect my fingers from the shards of metal as I'm cutting the can. And I also am wearing safety goggles because the metal starts to fly around as you start to cut the can apart and you don't want to injure your eyes. This class project is not recommended for children. Okay, the next thing I'm going to gather up for supplies is I'm going to need a serrated knife from the kitchen to puncture the can, and I'm also going to need a pair of scissors. And to cover the paint on the can, I'm going to use the Adirondack alcohol inks, and I'm going to use the copper color, the stream color to add a patina look, and I'm also going to use the Currant color to add with the copper to give a nice tone-on-tone effect. And then I'm going to use the applicator tool from Tim Holtz along with the felt application. So I have my can prepped, and I know it's good and dry and clean. Then I'm going to tape it down to my Cricut mat. Now I'm using my baby bug today in this project, and I'm going to use the Simply Sweet cartridge to cut out a flower. But if you'll notice, I used regular masking tape, and I taped the can down on all four edges securely. Do not be stingy with the tape. If you cut through the tape, it's perfectly fine. You'll be able to remove the tape off of the image after it's been cut. Now, you want to make sure, too, this will lift from the center as it's cutting, so you want to make sure your mat is very sticky underneath so that the metal adheres really well to the mat. You want to get all of the air bubbles out and really secure it down tight to that mat. Now, I taped mine down to the bottom left-hand corner of the mat, and the reason for that is whenever I put this mat in here, I'm going to hit load paper, and then I'm going to navigate down to the edge of the metal, and I'm going to select set paper size on my mat. The reason you do that is it lets the Cricut know that my paper is now 3 5/16 by 7 7/8 instead of 6 by 12, which is the mat size. I'm going to select my cut file, and it's going to be, in this particular instance, I'm going to use the shadow feature and the flower. And I've got my size set to 3 inches, and I'm also going to set my blade depth to 5, and I'm going to set my pressure to 5 or max. If you're using the expressions, you could set it to max. And then my speed is set to 3 or 4. About medium speed is fine. And I'm going to tell it to cut. Oh, it's telling me it's too big. So I'm going to come down to 2.5 inches and hit cut. Now that's another reason why you want to use the set paper size feature, because it lets the bug know that if your paper is too big or too small, so you don't waste this aluminum. Now I'm going to cut that flower out 2 times at that size, so you can hit repeat last and tell it to cut again. And then I'm also going to cut it out one more time in a 2-inch size. So it's just slightly smaller than the one I've currently cut. Now for purposes of this project today, I'm only going to cut it this 2 times to show you. So once you have your flower off, you want to clean up the edges just a little bit. Make sure you pick off the masking tape that's on there. So here we have our cutout shape. Now what we're going to do, because we really don't want to see the emblem or the logo of the can onto the flower, so what we're going to do is go ahead and you want to have all of your pieces trimmed at one time so that you can do everything in one cycle. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I am only going to do one section of this flower, and then you just keep repeating the process and changing the size of the petals to fit the project that you're currently working on, or the thickness the desired thickness of the flower. Now I'm going to take my Cuttlebug Embossing Jacket, And I'm using the circle one, and as you can tell on the embossing jacket, there is some type that's printed on it. It says Cuttlebug Provocraft. You want that facing up, and when you want to put your flower in the shiny side of the metal, the non-printed side of the metal, you want that up inside the Cuttlebug. And then I'm going to pull my Cuttlebug up, and I'm going to go ahead and emboss that image. Now this aluminum can is very thin, so it doesn't really take much to get it to emboss. So what we're going to use is our A mat down first, and then I'm going to use the B mat, and then I'm going to put my embossing jacket in, and remember it has the flower in it, and then I'm also going to choose the second B mat and lay it on top. Again, any kind of die cutting system that you have, I just happen to have the Cuttlebug, and you just turn the thing, press it through there, and you might hear a slight pop from the acrylic as it passes under. But once you take it all away, let me get this out of the way so we can see. We have a perfectly embossed flower now, and it's embossed on both sides of the can. Now what we're going to do is cover it with the alcohol ink. You want to make sure, too, that you're not using the alcohol ink on top of any kind of surface that is porous, because it will stain it permanently, and you want to clean it up immediately when you're using it. For me, these are tiles that I bought from Lowe's, and they're cheap, and if they get ruined, who cares? So what you're going to do is you're going to take your copper, and you want to make sure it's shook up really good, and then I'm going to add a little bit of the Currant color as well. Colored. So you're just going to dab it all around, making sure that you cover the entire surface. Now, on the side that's painted, it may take a couple of passes in order to get it right, but you want to make sure that this dries really good, and alcohol ink typically dries very fast. So you want it to dry very good before you flip it over, because you want as much of that ink to stay on there as possible. And I don't know if you can see it in the light of the video camera, but that's a pretty good coverage. Now once it's dry, we're going to flip it over and we're going to do the back. You know, you may want to do all your pieces at one time on the top and then go back to your first piece and do the back of the first piece so that they have an opportunity to dry. Like I said, alcohol ink dries very fast, so they this project goes pretty quick. So once I have the surface covered, if you notice this last time, it was the side that had the ink for the brand of the soda. So the alcohol ink has covered that very well. Now to give it a patinaed look, what I'm going to do is add a little bit more of the copper onto my applicator. Use the same applicator you used the last time. Just add a few drops just to kind of refresh it just a little bit. And then you want to add a drop or two of the stream color, because this is going to be a really nice green that is going to pull out a patinaed, weathered look on this copper. It's going to react really well with this metal. And you're just going to dab it in certain areas. You don't want to over dab it now. You want to go back over it with the copper and kind of cover up some of those spots, because you just want a hint of the green. You don't want a whole lot of the green. And again, flip it over, do it on the back. And if you end up with a little bit too much green, let it dry, go back over it with the copper, and that will cover it up a little bit. And there you have it. Now, to get the shape of the flower, you would do this 2 or 3 times and add a couple of layers. Now, in order to get that shape of that flower, what you're going to do is take the flower, put it in the palm of your hand, take the alcohol ink with the lid secured, and place it in the palm of your hand, and curl the flower up around the alcohol ink. Now, of course, if your flower is bigger than your alcohol ink, then you could use something else, like the Eileen's Tack It Over and Over glue bottle. That's a perfect size. And you can also take around these edges. Be careful though, because your metal will still break. It will still, if you're overzealous with it. Then you can also take a pen and just roll the petals up around the pen to give it some shape. In the center of my flower, like I said, I did a couple of shapes. And then I also added a brad that I painted with the alcohol ink too. So there you have it. You have a flower that was created with an aluminum can, and it's ready to be added to any of your scrapbook projects.